Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here again with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 8 of season 2 of Game of Thrones called The Prince of Winterfell. And for an episode with that title, we spend a surprisingly short amount of time with the quote-unquote Prince of Winterfell, Theon Greyjoy. But he's as good a place as any to get started on this review, so let's talk about him. Now, the scene that he has with Yara, this is honestly the first time I think that the actress playing her has really stepped up her game and really brought something to the character. Then again, this is also the first time that the character has shown any sort of emotion or really done much of anything beyond be a complete and utter dick to Theon for no real reason. The part where she expresses some genuine concern for his well-being, and when she tells him that story about him being a baby, that does give her, at long last, after so much of a season, does finally give her some emotional depth. But honestly, at this point, it just seems a little bit too little, too late. Now, before I continue on, of course, I guess I need to give my usual disclaimer in that I have read all the books, but that it's been more than a year since I read A Clash with Kings. So if I forget some of the details, if I get show and book continuity mixed up, forgive me for that. And also, as always, I will not spoil any of the big surprises in the series for you, but in order to do this review properly, I am going to need to talk about some of the smaller details. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back to what I was saying. Now, in the books, Asha, yeah, that's her book name, is given a lot more depth very early on. And I ended up liking her quite a bit. Here, I find Yara to be just kind of, I really hate to use this word since it's just thrown around on the internet in reviews so much, but it really is the first one that comes to mind, is that she's kind of insufferable. I don't really like Yara. I kind of hope that this show diverges off enough that she just. Now, given the important role that Asha plays as things unfold, I seriously doubt that's going to happen. But that's just the impression that I'm getting from her right now. But to continue to talk about Theon, they did cut out a lot of the stuff we saw in the book where Theon makes the decision to kill the Miller's sons. I mean, it's something he does in like half a frenzy, half a panic. And I understand why they did this, because they sort of want the audience to wonder if Bronn and Rickon are dead. And for people who, of course, are not familiar with the books, I can certainly understand how they might genuinely think that. But let's face it, very rarely on shows like this, if someone dies off screen, in all likelihood, they're probably not dead, unless something unfortunate has happened to the actor, like what happened with Old Nan, although I don't believe she was really ever mentioned again. But I could be wrong on that. My memory of season 1 is rather hazy at this point. But anyway, let's continue on with that. We do see that, as I've said in my other reviews, Theon continuing down that path to the dark side. And at the very end of this episode, we see where he gives the money to tries to give money to his lieutenant to say, go pay the farmer off for us having murdered his sons. Sorry for your trouble, dude. And then his lieutenant just points out, we already killed the farmer and his wife. What did you think we were going to do? And that just really right there shows that Theon is in way over his head. Not only is his position, as Yara rightfully points out, terrible in terms of strategy. She quite literally tells him that the strength of the Iron Men comes from the sea, and Winterfell is hundreds of miles from the sea. Just the fact that Bronn and his party are still roaming around out there. If they turn up on the doorstep of a friendly noble, Theon is just absolutely, completely, and utterly screwed, even more than he already is, with the inevitable. I mean, it is inevitable that word is going to get out of Winterfell what has happened one way or the other. He cannot keep this a secret forever. And then, as Yara tells him, every noble in the north is going to come gunning for his head. So it really is it really is just genuinely sad that Theon is so desperate for approval, for recognition, that he's willing to do all of this. And it and he's trying to do all of this and just trying to justify it to himself under the idea that the Iron Men take what they want. Well, that's the thing though. You can take a thing, but the question of course then becomes, can you hold it? And Theon in no way, shape, or form can hold Winterfell. He can, and he can certainly not hold onto any shred of what honor he may have once had after what he's done. But anyway, let's move on and hop over to the north briefly. We finally get to see the character of the Lord of Bones, rather interesting wildling that we see for a while in the books. Done pretty well. They certainly did make his suit of armor really interesting. It's certainly a lot better than what I was able to picture in the books. The only problem with it is that the Lord of Bones now looks like the bastard son of Skeletor and an Eskimo. And that sort of takes away from his menace a little bit. But seeing the beginnings of Half Hand's plan and knowing where all that leads later on, that did sort of serve to redeem what was going on up in the north in terms of Jon's story. Now what's happening with Sam and the other guys finding the dragon glass? Now that's some good stuff. That is something I've been looking forward to that scene because this is another step on Sam's journey, and it is, in all honesty, one of the big steps in his journey as a character. I will say that much for those of you who have not read the books, but yeah, definitely Sam is someone to be keeping an eye on at this point. So let's go and talk about Robb right now. The scene with him and his mom. Well, I certainly have no complaints about what's going on with Robb. Everything in terms of writing and acting that's happening right now with Robb, I'm really enjoying. His actor is just completely and utterly knocking it out of the park. Giving Robb this depth is something that in a lot of ways he really did lack in the books. Now, not always. Robb got his share of very good scenes in the books. But here, where he has taken the step into becoming more or less a full-fledged point of view, really has done a great service to his character. And that scene between him and Catelyn was just really crackling. It does show what this, again, even amongst the good guys, what the Game of Thrones can do in turning family against each other. And this time it's not the Lannisters. These are people who do genuinely and truly love each other. But even so, it is enough to turn Catelyn and Robb against each other to a degree. Now, as much as I love Catelyn, and Catelyn no doubt loves her children, I have to say, it really just feels to me like there has to be a limit. There has to be a limit to what kind of foolish thing she will do in order to get her two daughters back. Now, again, it is perfectly understandable that a mother would be willing to go to just about any length in order to protect her children. But, and this is the big thing with me and Catelyn, is Catelyn was raised as a noble woman. She has spent the majority, a pretty good chunk of her life, probably something in the neighborhood of half her life, in the North. She is not ignorant of the way of politics. Now, she's not really very experienced in dealing with war, but she knows certainly how nobles interact with each other. And she certainly does understand the value of negotiating from a position of strength. And sending Brienne off to King's Landing to trade Jaime for her daughters is just, in every conceivable strategic sense, stupid. I mean, really, what is to stop Cersei from saying, "Oh, hey, Jaime, good to see you. All right, go have a bath," and yeah, guards kill the ugly giant woman, and throw her head at the Stark kids just for laughs. I mean, there's nothing to prevent that. I mean, certainly Caitlyn can't figure that Joffrey or Cersei have any real honor, and I think we have a pretty good idea of what she thinks about Tyrion, even though her opinion of his is genuinely slightly more positive. Tyrion, while a powerful guy in King's Landing, is, despite his own best efforts, really not the guy running the show. So again, this is just, in terms of strategy, an incredibly poor choice. And not to mention, that's assuming that they even make it all the way to King's Landing. There's 100 things that could happen between where they are and King's Landing, not the least of which is Jaime getting one over on Brienne and just escaping. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in my review last week was they specifically said about Jaime being under guard how incredibly secure it is, how the people watching him were some of the best in Westeros. And then Jaime takes the guy out with the old, "Hey, my cellmate is sick" routine. And this guy, one of the smartest, best warrior guys in Westeros, doesn't even think to turn around and yell for backup saying, "Hey, come here and watch me to make sure that the prisoner doesn't do anything." And it's only because of that guy's incredible incompetence that Jaime got 1 foot outside of his cell. So yeah, there is, on Caitlyn's part, and to a lesser degree the folks in Rob's party who are not Rob in general, just being really, really bad about the whole strategy thing. If they really want to negotiate for it, they should certainly do this when they're much closer to King's Landing and Rob is in a much stronger position to make real serious demands. But anyway, continuing on with that though, the scene between Jaime and Brienne, that was all very nicely done, and I do like the fact that Brienne, of course, is certainly smart enough not to fall for Jaime's, frankly, very obvious and very weak attempts to provoke her into fighting him. Now, as good as Brienne is, I think I have to say that if it came down to the two of them, Jaime would probably win. And Brienne is, of course, probably knows this too. She's certainly not going to admit it to Jaime. But I like that she just, while she does get angry at him, she doesn't fall for his very obvious ploys, which thus does apparently make Brienne, quite possibly at this point, one of the most competent people on Rob's side. Well, she's on Rob's side in that she serves his mother. She is not, she is of course sworn to serve only Caitlyn, not Rob. But at this point, Rob needs all the help he can get. Let's talk about what's going on with Jaqen and Arya. I was expecting fully that it would be Jaqen that she would give as the final name. Too much stuff that happens with Arya's story depends on that detail. And even though we don't really see him do much of anything, just the presence that Jaqen leaves with that trail of bodies in his wake, it just says volumes about who he is and what he is and what he does. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that made more clear. I don't know if there's going to be time for it in the next couple of episodes because the season's just about wrapped up. I'm hoping it is, because that is some very big stuff, and it is the doorway to some extraordinarily cool stuff. Some of my favorite stuff from the next couple of books. Let me see here. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Let's hop back to Rob for a minute and talk about his relationship with Melissa. I believe that's how her name is pronounced. I'm sorry, Melissa. Melissa, not Melissa. Jeez. Anyway, I do think that they have done a very good job of incorporating this original character into the series. I know I've said this before, but this scene really does a lot to sell her as a character, to sell why Rob is in love with her and why he is willing to go and make the choice to be with her that he has now made. And again, credit to the writers, to the actress. This is all extraordinarily believable. Just that where she tells that story about her brother and the slave, it is there that Robb sees in this woman. She's already seen her as an extremely compassionate person, but here is where he sees the source of that. This is where he really sees very clearly, with no doubt, what kind of woman Melissa is in her heart. And it is that that Robb is drawn to more than anything else. And really, who can blame him? Because look at his parents. For all their flaws, for Ned's tendency to put honor before reason, for Catelyn's inability to not be a complete and utter jerk to Jon Snow just for having been born, Catelyn and Ned were genuinely good, kind, honest, moral people. And in Westeros, that is unfortunately the exception, not the rule. And Robb himself is a good, kind, and moral person. So him finding someone else like that, him finding someone who could be the Catelyn to his Ned, it is no wonder. It would be really out of character for Robb not to want to be with someone like that. It certainly is a much more palpable choice than a bridge and a woman whose first name you don't even know. So let's briefly hop over and talk about Davos and Stannis. Now I gotta say, the scenes we're getting between some of these guys, between these two guys, really are, I think, some of the absolute highlights of the season. It is really only with Davos do we get to see the human side of Stannis, especially now that his wife and his daughter are edited out of the story. Now, granted, his wife is mentioned, but we don't see her, and there's no mention made of his daughter. So here it is. We see that Stannis, oddly enough, in a way like Robb, values the character of a person more than any sort of title. And here we do see, for all his flaws, the one genuinely, in my opinion, kingly aspect to Stannis. He judges people on the content of their characters. And I like how he points out to Stannis, I'm sorry, I got a fly buzzing around my room right now. He does point out to Davos how Davos is an extremely moral guy, especially for an ex-smuggler, that he is willing to defend people who mock him, that he takes their mockery and turns it into his own symbol, into his own strength, and how no matter what, Davos remains loyal, and that Davos remains humble. He is, like Tyrion, someone who is, in many ways, ideally suited to being Hand of the King. But the thing is that Davos, unlike Tyrion, hates the Game of Thrones. He merely wishes to serve the man who he believes deserves his loyalty above all others. And that, folks, that simplicity, that strength of moral character is one of the reasons why I and so many people absolutely love Davos. So anyway, now it's time to hop over to King's Landing and talk about what's going on there. Joffrey being a stupid little idiot as usual. Not really a whole lot to say about that. Now the scene with Tyrion and Cersei. This really is the flip side of what we saw last episode, where Cersei in her own way was willing to be vulnerable as much as she possibly could to Tyrion, and Tyrion did seem to genuinely want to show her compassion, but there is just so much history, so much bad blood between them that they simply couldn't. A brother and sister simply could not show any genuine vulnerability, genuine kindness towards each other. And here we see the results of that. The desire to simply burn, to poison, to destroy each other's happiness, to destroy other people, simply because of a desire to hurt each other. Now, honestly, it's really not that it's really not so much on Tyrion's in the case of Tyrion, as has been said. He genuinely cares about um, his his niece and nephew, his nephew who isn't Joffrey, of course. And Cersei does sort of raise a good point that more or less Tyrion is indeed plotting Joffrey's death. But at this point, you have to really wonder about Cersei. She obviously doesn't want her son to die. On the other hand, she herself has realized that Joffrey is a complete monster, and even she is afraid of him. Now, okay, granted, as far as as she is concerned, and that he is the rightful king, but really, I can't help but wonder, what is Cersei thinking here? Does she really think that she can, ride the lightning or ride the storm, whatever? Ride the tiger. I think that is the term that I'm looking for. That seems to be all she's got in terms of a plan for dealing with Joffrey. That is her plan for dealing with Joffrey for the rest of her life, is to try and hope that he doesn't get pissed off enough to have her killed. And yeah, that is in so many ways a terrible, terrible idea. Now, one thing that I noticed about Cersei, and a lot of people have kind of commented on this, is how she talks about how she was a little girl, she wanted to be a knight and a fighter and a warrior like Jaime, and her dad just completely blew her off in that regard. And I've seen people sort of made the case that if he hadn't done that, then Cersei would have turned out to be a nice person. Now, I personally am skeptical of that. I am very, very impressed by Tyrion's ability to read people. And I think, and this is just my personal read on the characters, that even as a kid, he was able to see in Cersei one of her biggest flaws, and that is that Cersei tends to think that she is better at playing the Game of Thrones than she really is. Now, granted, Cersei's not bad at it, but she definitely has a tendency to overplay her hand. Sure, she manages to get her son firmly on the Iron Throne. Unfortunately, her son is a complete and utter sociopath who will, at this point, think nothing of having even her killed. She thinks that she's got Tyrion over a barrel, but she's got the wrong whore. And as we know from the books, that is not the end of Cersei's, oh, I know how to get out of this, and then having it completely and utterly blow up in her face. So, yeah, I think Tywin saw this flaw in Cersei, and that's why he didn't encourage her to go that direction. Of course, she still ended up going down that path and having stuff blow up in her face on a routine basis. But, well, you can't have everything now, can you? Anyway, to kind of move towards the end of things here, the scene with Tyrion and Shae, that really was a very well done, wonderful scene. It does remind us that, for all his flaws, that Tyrion is capable of the closest thing to what I would consider genuine and pure love out of anybody in the Lannisters. He really doesn't want anything from Shae except for her love and her happiness. And the scene where he's talking about how he does love to play the game, that says so much, I think, about Tyrion, because him playing the game, it does show us that while the Game of Thrones can be horrible, while it can destroy people, it is a necessary evil in so many ways. And that, yes, lots of bad people can play it, but it reminds us that good people can play it and play it well, and ultimately do good with it. The game is the double-edged sword. Whether or not it is good or bad, it is inevitable. It is what you do in the game, the choices you make and the results of it, that determine whether or not it is bad. Dany, we don't get to see more than a few minutes of her. Not a whole lot to say about what's going on. Again, some really nice performances from the fella playing Ser Jorah. He's really knocking that stuff out of the park. But yeah, we're just not. We don't really see anything really of substance from Danny that this episode. So, but I have a feeling that's going to change pretty darn quick. Anyway, folks, that's all I really do have to say about this episode. So, until next time, take care, have a good one. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can also follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, see ya.